So you're using the humor blueprint to set up an expectation and then to give us an equally satisfying example, but not what we were pointing at. And that's the bait and switch.
Greetings, everyone. Come on in and have a seat up front for the Funny Muscle Podcast. If you're here, then you're looking to learn how to create laughs like a pro. So please help me welcome to the stage your co-host to help you do that, economics professor and open micer Chris Stifler and comedian turned author Mike Lucas.
Hey.
Mike Lucas, comedian, author.
Oh, that's true. I have that on my title card.
How you doing?
Is that a little bit presumptuous, or what do they call that? Is that braggadocious?
That's a dictator. If you were like excellent lover, it'd be a little more
That'd be a lie.
braggadocious. It would just make you a liar. That's funny. It doesn't
Yeah,
make you braggadocious. It just makes you a liar.
makes me a liar. Makes me bullshitting you to. I'm trying to make you like me better. Did it work?
Uh,
How you doing, man?
so what do you know? I was thinking we break down some bits and look at the setup punchline. What do you think?
Yeah,
What do you want to teach us today?
I was looking at these bits that I gathered, and well, what we talked about was the first part of the methodology of the humor blueprint, which I call humor blueprint, which is the premise, setup, punchline format. And the first part of it, we talked about where you take a topic and you add your emotion, and then you get a premise, and then that basically tells not only the audience not only what you're talking about, but how you feel about what you're talking about. So it gives them a reason why you're bringing up this particular topic. And then what we're going to talk about today is the second part of the joke, which is the setup, where you're setting up a misdirection. You're setting the part of the game of stand up is you're setting up a misdirection for the listener so that they think that you're taking this story that you've brought up in a very typical direction, something that they can predict, something like where they can guess the next step. You're forcing their hand to think of an obvious next step, and then your job as a comic is to outwit them with a answer to that setup that satisfies that setup that isn't expected, that comes from nowhere, that comes out of the blue, and that unexpected moment allows them to click and say, "Oh, I get it. I get why what you say also applies to the setup you misdirected me with." So today I wanted to just look at that misdirection. I wanted to see what these comics how they misdirect us into thinking that this bit is going in a typical way, and also examine in this modern comedy era that there are some comics that skip that part. It used to be premise, setup, punchline was what made you a comic, and you did that over and over again, and that was your act. Then we started inventing things that are like act outs, ways that we can demonstrate contrast, ways we demonstrate a simile, we demonstrate the combination of worlds that we're talking about, and it avoids doing the premise, setup, punchline joke in the beginning. And when we do that, it's not really stand up. It's more like improv sketch scripted, kind of a thing where you're cutting straight to the act out. You're cutting straight to the back and forth between characters as opposed to doing a joke first. I was guilty of that in the beginning of my career, and not just the beginning of my career, right up to where I was doing the Tonight Show. But I was bringing in that new style into existence along with other people, and a lot of traditional comics didn't like that. They were like, "Where are your jokes?" And so I teach now at the Dallas Comedy Club, and part of what I teach is how to create the premise, setup, punchline joke, and then how to extend that with an act out later, like the modern comics do, once that joke is established.
I like how you said, I never heard you say this before, force them to guess the next step, as though it's not a passive thing that you're trying to do a setup. You should be able to intentionally think about how you're making people make that logical leap, and
Yeah.
then I like that. I like that. I wrote that down in my notes today. Force them to guess the next step.
Yeah, you're it's the misdirection that you're doing. And we'll watch that. We're gonna watch some clips today and listen to some clips today, I should say, since this is an audio podcast. But we're gonna listen to some clips today, and we're going to point out the different elements of their joke. Part of that being the misdirection that they're trying to intend with their audience. And I brought an example where there is no joke in the beginning, where it goes straight into the act out, and to show you what I'm talking about when I mean the modern comics often skips that step. Let me start off, and then we'll go back and forth if you want. Wait, what? Oh yeah, here we go. This one's pretty good. This one is Matt Kinney, and he does a simile, funny specifics, recognition, and exaggeration. So, okay, his first sentence, he says, "I take alcoholism seriously." It kind of cuts it off. So we'll take it from there.
I take alcoholism pretty seriously because when I was a kid, I was hit by a drunk driver. I was 7 years old and I was in the passenger seat. We pulled up to a stoplight.
Okay, so let's break it down so far. Like his premise is what? Alcoholism. I take alcoholism pretty seriously. So that's his he has an emotion about it.
Emotion right away. You basically state the emotion.
Yeah, and so he's telling us and giving us an example of how he takes it seriously. So in our mind, he's setting us up for misdirection, where this is a serious joke about alcoholism.
I take alcoholism pretty seriously because when I was a kid, I was hit by a drunk driver. I was 7 years old and I was in the passenger seat. We pulled up to a stoplight. We go, and then bam, just like out of nowhere, my dad slapped me in the face.
So he's been hit by an alcoholic. His dad smacked him in the face. So that's the bait and switch. So let's listen to it again from beginning to end, just so.
We sense up tension too, because you're waiting for a bad sudden collision or
Yeah, you're
something
waiting for
terrible,
like somebody
right?
died, somebody got killed. One of his family members that he loves was killed by an alcoholic, which is why he takes it real seriously. So he's forcing our hand to think that way.
Somber tone, kind of a little bit
Yeah.
like avoiding eye contact.
Yeah, he's kind of delivering it physically also, where it makes us think that he's about to go into a sad place.
I take alcoholism pretty seriously because when I was a kid, I was hit by a drunk driver. I was 7 years old and I was in the passenger seat. We pulled up to a stoplight. We go, and then bam, just like out of nowhere, my dad slapped me in the face.
So that's the whole joke. And where's the misdirected? The misdirect is I'm going to make you think that I'm going in a real serious direction with this bit, and then he surprises us by using our mind is he's going to show us what a stranger alcoholic did to him to make him take it seriously. Turns out his dad's the alcoholic, and he didn't hit him with a car. He hit him with his hand. So he's using wordplay with hit. I got hit by an alcoholic.
Yeah, that's the connector, right? Hit by an alcoholic can be taken two different ways and two
Right.
different tracks.
Two different kinds of
He's paying
alcoholics, two different kind of hits.
Yeah, I think so what magic is he using this to set us up on the one track? He's like he's talking about the stoplight. So immediately your brain jumps to a four-way stoplight on the road in a car.
Yeah, he's hinting at got hit by a car, so he's giving us all car hints. I'm driving with my family. All four, we're in the car. We get to the stop sign, and from out of nowhere, and so the first thing we think of is he gets hit in the side by a drunken driver. We've heard that story over and over again. So that's what he's misdirecting us towards. But really, it's his dad smacking him in the face. Bait and switch. Funny specifics, recognition. So we see what he does. He takes us for a ride. That's a good joke. That's a funny joke. It's a little wordy because he sets it up so long, but the payoff is big. So he justifies it.
Yeah, but I think I initially thought it was wordy until I heard the punchline, and I realized kind of why he did it because
Yeah.
like it builds a little tension. But if he just said the light turned green and my dad punched me in the face, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be as funny as the light turned green and out of nowhere. It almost
Right.
like pauses you for a second, builds a little more extra
Yep.
tension.
And I'll bet
And then
you
my dad.
I don't know, that's Matt Kinney. I don't know Matt Kinney, so I don't know how he does this bit typically, but I'll bet you it took a lot of runs of this bit to find out the right wording to set this up. Like longer, shorter. He might have tried it shorter and it didn't work. at an open mic.
That's an example of a pure setup punchline.
Yeah,
We were on two different tracks. There was two different tracks, and we were jumped at the last second to the other track, and
yeah,
our brain surprised us with a laugh because
we
we
get
were
it.
tricked.
Yeah, we get that he got hit out of nowhere by an alcoholic, just not the way we thought. So that's the game. And then, the job of the comic is to do that over and over and over again. Now, he could, before he does another premise setup and punchline, Matt Kinney could do an act out of his father smacking him and do a frog bank or unlikely scenario where two worlds come together that aren't no don't typically come together, and he could do a uh you know um immediately after an accident from a drunk driver, and then replace drunk driving with getting slapped. And he could have a moment with his dad after the accident, the so-called accident where he gets smacked, and they could have I think he broke my neck, or whatever. But that's not funny. But he could do an act out after that joke, and it would be perfectly acceptable. He could do an act out of the ambulance showing up, making sure he's okay from his slap. He could do an act out of a different perspective of somebody who witnessed the accident, and said, "Did you see what that drunk driver did? Yeah, he smacked his son in the face, or whatever." And so there's a way to modernize that with an act out if you wanted to, but I don't think he does. I think he just moves on.
I think maybe you could take maybe another perspective of someone who's texting and driving, and even they're offended by
Right,
they're overtly dangerously texting and driving, drinking or whatever, and they
right.
stop and like,
I'm scared. I'm more scared of that angry alcoholic who's slapping everybody.
uh,
Yeah, and again, it's his joke and it's his, idea. So, and it's his dad. He's making fun of the fact that his dad was an angry alcoholic, and he received the brunt of his anger. So I don't know how much truth there is in that. There might be that might be the truth that he's exaggerating. That would be a
so
noble attempt.
there's something deeper about a joke like that because it forces the audience to put that last piece of the puzzle together, the micro puzzle or
Yeah,
the
he's not
it's a
talking
little
about this.
different
He's
than
talking about that.
yeah.
Yeah, when you
It's
can get
different than
the
just
audience to
laughs.
put that puzzle together, that gets a big laugh. They like that. It's something fun for the audience to do.
You almost want to even applaud the craft, right?
Yeah,
The craft of like being tricked.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It was good. It was and it's funny. We're here to see a comic. We're here to laugh. And then when he starts in on the alcoholic driver, or getting hit by an alcoholic out of nowhere, like he really sells us, and we forget that we're there to laugh, and we're like, oh God, this is going to be a serious moment. It's not. He's a comic, but he fools us.
Yeah. So is that a bait and switch then? To use
Yeah,
your
that's a
humor
bait and
heightening
switch,
tools?
funny specifics and recognition.
Recognition.
Off of a great premise where he talks about a topic with his emotion, and it's a really well done joke. All right, you got one you can share if you want.
This is really a very, very tight joke. Uh, I was watching some Anthony Jeselnik.
Well, all his jokes are pretty tight.
Yeah, there are. When I was trying to brainstorm ideas of who has the setup punchline twist, he's one of the purer ones out there right now because he doesn't really do act outs. He's only just
No, he
bait and
goes,
switch.
all right, so here's the
I think it's a 15 word joke.
15-word joke.
It's
Okay,
gonna
let's see
pack.
if I catch it here.
It's gonna pack in setup punchline.
I think my friend Jeff is gay. I don't know. I'm so bad with names.
So that's a funny joke. And so it's quick, and it's a bait, and he does a lot of bait and switch. I thought you meant this, but you really meant that. I thought you were talking about this, but you really meant that. So the confusion isn't about whether or not his friend is gay. The confusion is about whether or not he can remember his name.
Well, he uses the word friend too, so it goes to
Yeah.
his persona of being kind of a dick. Like
Right.
if you're a friend, you know the person's name, but he
Right.
doesn't even know his friend's name.
So let's see the premise.
I think my friend Jeff is gay.
Okay, so This is one of those comics that he like. I think my friend Jeff is gay. He doesn't give us an emotion. He doesn't say, "I'm happy to find out that my friend Jeff is gay. I'm bummed to find it out. I'm angry. He surprised me and I didn't know, so I'm pissed or shocked." But what Anthony Jeselnik kind of gives us, because he's a pro and he's been doing this for a while, is when we watch him, we already know him, and we get his emotion, his overall emotion. His overall emotion is sort of he's over it. He's pissed off. He's frustrated. Life frustrates him. People frustrate him. Everybody in his world lets him down a little bit, and he's pointed out from my watching of his stuff. So his emotion is a kind of implied. He's like Bill Burr. Like, when you watch a Bill Burr bit, Bill Burr doesn't have to tell you how he feels. His voice and his emotion, his overall emotion tells us, oh, this is another reason why Bill's frustrated. And we just get that his overall emotion is frustrated. So that's what I would give Anthony Jeselnik credit for emotion just implied by who he is and how he talks. But as a new comic, that's real hard to do. I would recommend being more overt with it as a newer comic. So what's his premise? So his topic is being gay, homosexuality, and the premise is I think my friend Jeff is gay. And the implied emotion is, and it causes me some kind of grief, you know. So we think the grief is that he's got a friend who he doesn't know whether or not he's gay, and he's finding this out, and that's very delicate, for in a friendship, to find out that your good friend feels differently about something that you feel strongly about as well.
I think my friend Jeff is gay. I don't know. I'm so bad with names.
So it's funny, and why is it funny? Because he's talking about I was questioning his name, let alone whether or not he's a homosexual. So that's a bait and switch for sure. And it's a recognition laugh because we're all bad at names. How bad at names is he? He's so bad at names that he can't even remember if his friend's name. And
I kind of think of that as like I call that a selective fact check. Wherever you see that, you see the bit where like you say something and you're like, that's not true. And then like you ignore the big part of the statement that you thought you were gonna switch, and then you nitpick a tiny part of the
yeah,
statement.
I guess that's a good way to put it. Yeah. But he that's really kind of a bait and switch where he implies that he's talking about one thing and then he switches at the last second that he's talking about something different, but it still applies. Like, but it's classic bait and switches. My wife and I were making love, and then suddenly we got kicked out of Walmart.
The norm of the environment you painted in your head is a bed,
We're
and then
in the
suddenly
bed in the bedroom, and it's really I'm at a store, so that's a classic bait and switch. Um, that's good. That's fun. That's again, that's a really experienced comic, and he's got a lot of things that he's doing in a shorter period of time. But he's a really good writer. Like that's what he does. Now he does a lot of bait and switches. Like that's his thing. So if you're a comic like him, you got to get really good at doing that device. You got to get good at disguising it because it becomes very predictable after a while when you do a lot of the same thing. So the audience is trying to guess what word is he going to play off of that misdirects us.
right. But is there a way to articulate the difference between setup punchline versus bait and switch? Are they the same thing? Or in like your note, like your formal methodology, is there a difference between setup punchline and bait and switch?
Well, you're confusing two things. Setup punchline is part of the humor blueprint. So it's where it's the in a bait and switch is what you're doing with that part of the humor blueprint. So you're using the humor blueprint to set up an expectation and then to give us an equally satisfying example, but not what we were pointing at, and that's the bait and switch. So one's a heightening device, and one is part of the humor blueprint, and you're using that part of the humor blueprint to you're using that humor heightening device in that part of the humor blueprint to get that done. It's a little confusing, and not really for me, but I get where it could be confusing.
Because in some sense, every setup is kind of a switch, isn't it?
Your misdirection is a bit of a bait and switch. Any kind of misdirection you could accuse of being a bait and switch. I was telling you it was going to be this, and it turned out to be that. So, in a way, you could accuse all misdirection as being a bait and switch. But you'll see, like for instance, this next one, this is Ryan Dempsey. Um, this one might skip Ryan Dempsey. This is a simile, funny specifics, recognition, and exaggeration.
I have a really hard time talking to preteens.
So I have a really hard time talking to preteens. That's her premise. The premise is preteens, and the emotion is I have a really hard time talking to preteens. So I struggle. I'm this is difficult for me. So how big of a struggle is this?
Because I remember that time so vividly and I'm a little bit intense with them.
So she goes on to explain a little bit more about her emotion. I can remember that time vividly, and I'm a little bit more intense with them. So how the question is, how intense am I?
Because to me, it is like,
What is that?
Simile.
Yeah. So she's about to launch into a simile. So what did she just do? She gave us a premise, and she's launching right into a simile. So she's skipping the misdirection.
because to me, it is like talking through a pane of glass to a prisoner at a prison I used to be an inmate at.
So she's given us a real funny simile as a punchline. So you could argue that her misdirection is I have a hard time talking to preteens because I used to be one, and it's really intense for me. So she's sort of misdirecting us to think that this is going to be a serious talk on preteens and communication. And instead she compares it to being at a prison I used to be at, an inmate at. So there's a funny connection there. It's like I used to be a preteen, I used to be an inmate.
Talking through a pane of glass to a prisoner at a prison I used to be an inmate at. Picking up the phone on the side, like.
So she goes right into the act out. So there's a bit of skipping the joke part of this.
I think you should be using this time to read. And by the way, your friends in there will not be your friends out here. Unless something goes really, really wrong.
So she's frog banking. She's doing the visitor at a prison, talking about life as a prisoner, and then after jail. But the prison is really the bank is preteens. So she does an act out of the simile. So you could argue that this is her premise. I mean, this is her premise.
I have a really hard time talking to preteens because I remember that time so vividly and I'm a little bit intense with them.
So that's her premise. I'm a little bit. So the setup could be.
Because to me, it is like.
That could be the setup. To me, it's like difficult and causes me a lot of pain. To me, it's like without doing a simile, she could say it's she could do it like she's misdirecting us to think she's going to go into a simile that is about pain, so it's going to be serious. So you could say that that's her misdirection, and then the punchline is that it's not a serious simile.
Talking through a pane of glass to a prisoner at a prison I used to be an inmate at.
So that could be
that's
the punchline. She's got the hand up like she's talking on the glass.
Fixing the glass.
Yeah. And then she does the phone, the jail phone, which is a classic where you're doing a phone. You just did fingers, but this is a phone. These are fingers. This is a phone. That's a classic improv mistake that new improvisers make.
Really? This is fake?
This is fingers. This is a phone. Or this is a phone.
So when you say fingers, I'm making a Y with my hand. My pinky and my thumb.
Yeah, you're talking into fingers now. A phone, when you don't hold a phone like this.
So that's a bad mistake.
Yeah. You're
improv.
making a classic improv mistake, which is to make your fingers into the phone when really you should just be holding a phone and
Like you
talking
hold
it.
fun.
Yeah, like you don't hold it like this either. There's no room for it. You have to put a space in your hand. Like when I hold my cell phone, I go like this.
Yeah, you're right.
So then just take out the cell phone and then hold your hand like that and then
Yeah,
talk.
you're right.
Yeah. So that's going to look more realistic than doing this, even though this is sort of like this is what every amateur does about for a phone.
With the Y and the
With
talking
the
into your
yeah.
pinky.
Yeah, with the yeah, sorry, I forget we're audio. With the Hawaiian, hang loose dude thing. So
That's funny.
but let's see, what does she do that?
Picking up the phone on the side.
Yeah,
How did she do it?
check it out. She does what I'm talking about. This is her t doing the phone. See her hand?
Oh yeah, she just hold it with a.
So maybe she has some improv training. But she's a good actress. She's acting out really well. So in that case, like this is one of those bits where I could argue that this woman is doing a premise setup and punchline misdirection and then surprising us with a new answer to that setup that still satisfies it. Um, a traditional comic might argue that she's skipping that part because she's not doing an old fashioned, boom boom kind of joke first. But I would argue that she's doing the modern version of what we say is the premise setup and punchline, and it's perfectly acceptable and it's funny. That's a funny joke.
It's like she has like the act out, and but then she uses kind of her emotion
Her name
and
is
uses
Ryan
her kind of
Dempsey,
somber.
by the way. Ryan Dempsey is what her name is. Sorry, go ahead, keep going.
So like she has the funniest part of that is the act out, but she does carve it into stand up kind of blueprint by kind of having that somber kind of introduction. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Without
and you could you could say that the punchline is just the mentioning of the simile. It's like being part of a prison, being talking to a prisoner in a prison you used to belong, you'd be a part of, whatever, however she said it. So that could be her punchline, and she could just move on from there. She could just, that could be her, premise, setup, and punchline. That was a misdirection. That was a surprise. A simile we didn't expect. But it's funnier in a simile to act out a simile to show us what do you mean by these two things are similar. And then so she does the frog bank or the unlikely scenario of the phone call through the glass. But it's instead of about jail, it's about being a preteen.
it's a good example, a different example.
Yeah. All right. So this is Rosebud Baker. She does a negative to positive, funny specifics, and recognition.
Once I decided like what kind of mother I was going to be, I kind of like could picture it. And then my husband and I got hit with a curveball, which is that we lost the pregnancy, which is tough. Yeah.
So there's a premise. We got pregnant. We lost the pregnancy, which is tough. So she doesn't really emote much. She's probably autistic like the rest of us comics, and so she's not a typical woman who is going to be like, and that was rough, and like start to cry. She's a comic, and so she said, she tells us though it was rough, so we have to believe her. So that's the premise.
But God never gives you more than you can handle. And
And there's the punchline. It takes a minute to get that, right? God never gives you more than you can handle. And that's one of those jokes where you put in you have to do the math. You go, oh, she's taking a negative and turning it into a positive. So she's taking the miscarriage which is a negative, and she's turning it into a positive, which is God. It's a message from God that we couldn't have handled this kid. So the crowd takes a minute for them to get that, but that's her joke.
I guess I'd had enough abortions where he was like, this one's on the house.
So now she's doing act out of cut forward to God, and that's also overstating the obvious. A miscarriage is like God's abortion.
What a freebie.
I got a freebie, which is funny. Because she's talking about an abortion. But she's somebody who's had an abortion, so this is a topic she can talk about, and she can make fun of the fact that her miscarriage was a free abortion, and she had enough abortions already where maybe God assumed that's what she wanted. Funny, use of premise, setup, and punchline. Right? She had a good premise that gave us an emotion,
And then finally, once I decided like what kind of mother I was going to be, I kind of like could picture it. And then my husband and I got hit with a curveball, which is that we lost the pregnancy, which is tough. Yeah.
Right. So the topic is pregnancy. By it's tough to lose a pregnancy when you're in the middle of it, and that's her premise. So that's, how tough is it? It's so tough that I have to look at it opposite. I have to turn that negative into a positive to fool myself.
Yeah. But, God never gives you more than you can handle. And
And that's a bit of a joke. And then
With and
yeah. So she's using it. She's a pro, so she's using that technique to get us to laugh. And it takes them the second to laugh. And I'll bet you that was a laugh that she discovered like organically, where she said it as a throwaway maybe, and then it got a bigger laugh than she expected because people got her real humor about it, which is this: God was doing me a favor by not letting me be a mom because I couldn't handle it. But interesting use of that misdirection, because when you're talking about the miscarriage, you wouldn't think that she's going to turn that into a positive. You'd think she's going in a negative direction. We lost the pregnancy. We were heartbroken, as anyone would be. We cried together as a couple. We buried our daughter in a cemetery in a small casket, or whatever the sad thoughts are that go with miscarriage. So that's how she misdirects us. And then she's really saying, she fools us, and she's like, well, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. Glass half full.
so your first example, the setup was a connector, where hit by an alcoholic
Yeah,
is reinterpreted in two different ways.
yeah,
Whereas your other last two examples it was almost the emotion and the somber topic and tension that then suddenly were
right.
taken a different way.
It's a good
There was
point.
no connector word. There was no like the two double meaning of one single
No,
word.
no, she does that a little bit with God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And that's a
No, I didn't get the actual
overstating,
hand like the.
yeah, overstating the obvious of handling a baby,
Mm,
maybe. I don't know, but no, I know what you mean. There's not a real like game that she's playing like in those other ones where she's doing wordplay. Because that's what you could accuse the other ones of using as wordplay. You thought I meant this, I meant that. And this word
right.
can mean
Yeah.
both. Yeah.
But it's funny how you're articulating with when we're looking at the magic of the setup. It's not just words. It's somber eye contact. It's
There's,
the way
yeah, emotion.
you walk on stage. There's emotion of the delivery that's part of the setup.
And that's part of why emotion is so important. Because what emotion does, I just thought of this. When you give an emotion, it's implying something. I'm angry. So you're implying a setup. You're setting up, how angry am I? I'm so angry I punched a wall. Well, that's not funny. So it has to be something different. I'm so angry I punched my mom, but that's not funny. But you know what I mean? You have to take like that emotion that you supply in the premise is a way to misdirect into something serious. Do you have any more? Do you have any more examples or
Yeah, one more. I like it, but I can't say that. Well, let's analyze it. I think it's a lot. First two I brought were very easy. You could see setup, punchline, misdirection, bait and switch. This one is a Daniel Tosh bit, which I'm going to see is some reinterpretation, some recognition, and then he'll move into an unlikely scenario and funny specifics, and a little bit of
okay.
bait and switch at the end. But I don't know if it really has setup punchline. But let's see.
Daniel Tosh is very funny.
He's touring again. I got tickets to see him in June. He's in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think he's a likable guy. All right, so let me share the screen. He's a funny guy too. I know I worked with him somewhere.
He's going to start with the saying. The reinterpretation of the saying is
Oh, gotcha.
where the bit starts. This is good enough.
You're never going to be famous. Never. You have no chance. I didn't get here because I work hard. I have a gift from God. Everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame, buddy. Excuse me? That's an average. Yeah, that's 0 for you, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 20 years, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Everybody gets 15 minutes. You know Andy Warhol was on drugs when he said that, right? He didn't think he'd be quoted for the rest of eternity, let alone taken seriously as an artist. You ever go into like a cute local cafe and an artist has their work for sale on the walls? Has anybody ever not walked up, looked at the price, and gone, who the fuck do they think they are?
Yeah. Funny. Yeah, so let's go
Well,
back.
there's you keep watching the next 20 seconds, and then let's go back. Because he does unlikely scenario then.
Just once, I'd like to walk into somebody's home and be like, wow, that is a beautiful piece. Where did you get it? And they're like, oh, funny story. I was getting a spinach wrap the other day for lunch, and I had $750 burning a hole in my pocket. And I was like, hey, guys, unbolt this from your urinal and get it into my living room.
Overstating the obvious. Yeah, it's funny. So what was he
Once
talking?
he starts talking about that everyone gets 15 minutes of fame. And then he's going to reinterpret that as an average.
Right. So he's first he sets it up. Let me go back further.
If I meet one more kid and ask him what he wants to do when he gets older, and he replies, I'll be famous like you, I'm going to kick him in his teeth.
Yeah, because that's the premise of this other joke is if I meet one more kid who says he wants to be famous, he's frustrated. And then the bait and switch is I'm going to help him, I'm going to give him the secret to success. I'm going to kick him in the teeth is a funny bait and switch.
You're never going to be famous. Never.
So that you're never going to be famous. This is his act out. The cut forward to me talking to that kid and telling him the truth, overstating the obvious.
You're never going to be famous. Never. You have no chance. I didn't get here because I work hard. I have a gift from God.
Then he turns it on himself. I'm using sarcasm and exaggeration in part of this act out. This is him talking to that kid again. Still,
No, I didn't realize it was the act out.
it gets an applause break because he's overstated the obvious about why he's famous.
Everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame, buddy. Excuse me?
So then that's a setup, a new premise. Everybody gets 15 minutes of fame, but look at what's his emotion when he says it. You can tell he's got an emotion.
Everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame, buddy. Excuse me?
He's like, fuck that. Nuh-uh. It bothers him that people say that that's true. He knows that that's not true. He's going to tell us how not true it is, how much this bothers him.
That's an average.
So now he's overstating the obvious.
Yeah, that's 0 for you, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 20 years, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Right? So it's overstating the obvious with funny specifics and recognition.
Is there a set up punchline to that?
Yeah, he says, everyone gets 15 minutes of fame.
Everybody gets their 15 minutes of fame, buddy. Excuse me?
So that's his premise right there. Excuse me? That's an average. Okay. So that's the setup. That's an average. So
yeah, that's 0 for you.
So now he's doing the punchline, which is overstating the obvious and like an act out.
What's the norm there when you say that's the average? Are you expecting like, hey, you get 30 minutes, you get 3 minutes, you get 60 minutes, you get 4 minutes?
Yeah, you expect it to be. Instead, he's saying you get nothing and I get all of it.
Yeah, okay, that's the turn. That's a surprise.
That's an average. Yeah, that's 0 for you, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 20 years, 0, 0, 0, 0.
Right. So as opposed to we all get a little, which is what 15 minutes, feels like. If I get at least 15 minutes of, no, you don't. I took your 15 minutes. Yeah, it's funny.
That is set up punchline.
Yeah.
It's just harder to me. That's harder to see the clear setup punchline.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing about a really good comic is someone like Daniel Tosh is a really good comic because we disguise the humor blueprint. We don't do it in an obvious way that's easily predictable, and that's why he's so good is because he disguises it. That's why also he's using multiple heightening devices, and he's orchestrating them together beautifully. And that's hard to do. A lot of newer comics only use one heightening device, and they don't know to use, funny specifics and recognition along with a contrast, along with a bait and switch.
When he goes about it, everyone has been in a coffee shop and sees like the ridiculously overpriced
Right. Yeah. Then that
local
one,
artist
that,
recognition.
so that joke, that's a whole different joke.
Yeah.
So
Everybody gets 15 minutes. You know Andy Warhol was on drugs when he said that, right? He didn't think he'd be quoted for the rest of eternity, let alone taken seriously as an artist.
Is that really a joke, or is he just kind of bridging into from the one topic into the next topic of artists in a local coffee shop?
yeah, he's given us the it's a segue, Andy Warhol into art. So that's a cut on Andy Warhol. He's just doing this as a segue to get to this art piece.
You ever go into like a cute local cafe and an artist has their work for sale on the walls? Has anybody ever not walked up, looked at the price, and gone, who the fuck do they think they are?
So that's the premise. You ever go to a local cafe and an artist has their work on the walls? He doesn't really give us an emotion yet. He doesn't tell, but Daniel Tosh, we know he's probably frustrated by it.
Anybody ever not walked up, looked at the price, and gone, who the
Anyone ever gone up, looked at the price, and thought, "I wish I could afford that. I wish I had that kind of money because I would really like that kind of art in my." So that's the misdirection. That's what he's, And then instead, what do we say?
walked up, looked at the price, and gone, who the fuck do they think they are?
Who the fuck they think they are? So it's a bit of a bait and switch, and it's a different perspective. It's from the point of view of the guy who is calling out the artist.
And he jumps to the unlikely scenario, which then has funny specifics and a bit of bait and switch inside the unlikely scenario act out.
Yeah, which is someone who has expensive art in their house, but this one came from the bathroom of a coffee shop.
Just once, I'd like to walk into somebody's home and be like, wow, that is a beautiful piece. Where did you get it? And they're like, oh, funny story. I was getting a spinach wrap the other day for lunch.
So this is exaggeration, overstating the obvious, and it's an act out of a different perspective, or a cut forward to, or cut back to.
And I had $750 burning a hole in my pocket. And I was like, hey guys, unbolt this from your urinal and get it into my living room.
All the funny, my urinal, unbolt.
Wrap.
Funny,
Spinach wrap.
funny specifics.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's funny. It's a good bit, and we can see that he uses his premise, setup, and punchline with the misdirection in his own way. He does it, but he's doing it over and over again. We watched him do it 3 times. All right, so wait, here's one last. I've got one last one. This is my favorite guy, Fahim Anwar. He's my new favorite guy.
Like sexual identity is such a new thing. Like there's boys out there who want a vagina. That's kind of new. Like when I was growing up, we just wanted Jordans.
Okay, so here's a contrast. These new kids do it like this. When I grew up, I did it like that. And with a contrast, the way a contrast typically works is the setup is the first comparison. So let's see how he does it.
Like sexual identity is such a new thing. Like
sexual identity is such a new thing is the premise. He doesn't really give us an emotion. And we don't really know him well enough to know what his natural emotion is.
there's boys out there who want a vagina. That's kind of new.
So that's the setup. There's boys out there that want a vagina. That's kind of new. So what's that? That's got us misdirected to thinking that this is going to be a conversation on sexual identity and serious about how people choose their thing. So he says boys right now are like this. And so the setup is we're going to talk about a serious issue, but then he contrasts it.
Like when I was growing up, we just wanted Jordans.
So new boys want a vagina. We just wanted Jordans. So that's the contrast. And there's the punchline.
Knowing my dad, he would buy me the cheapest.
So now he does an unlikely scenario. Knowing my dad. So he does his dad buying jeans, but instead he's buying a vagina. But he would buy him the cheapest vagina because his dad's cheap. So there's an emotion there. I'm frustrated with my dad's cheapness.
I'd be like, I want the Hunter Schafer Euphoria Premium model. He's like, this is just as good. It doesn't even fit. You'll grow into it.
So there's the frog bank. That's jeans, but it's also a vagina.
Use your brother's he's not using it anymore.
The hand-me-down.
Kids in China who don't have a they don't have any. Be happy you have.
So he's using all the frog is the dad trying to get the kid to try on these pants, these cheap pants, and telling him why it's okay that they're cheap. But the bank is a vagina. So which he set up in the beginning by saying that kids today want a new pussy. So it's funny, and it tells us about him. It tells us about like the family that he comes from. I come from a dad who was really tight, and the cultural norms of my family growing up.
That's a good for a frog bank there.
Yeah,
You just see the frog bank.
yeah, and he uses a joke to get to the frog bank, and that's the best kind of comedy I would say now is a combination of those two worlds, which is you do stand up where you tell the joke, you do the premise setup, misdirection, punchline, and then you do the act out, and then you do the more modern version of what we're doing now, which is you take us to that place and then you heighten it and you act it out and you do voices and you show us what you were talking about and give a heightened demonstration of your point. So and if you're missing any of that, you're leaving meat on the bone.
And in your own personal comedy, is that where you kind of mentioned that you kind of had more of the act out frog bank, unlikely scenario in your stand
Yeah,
up.
I would tend to jump right to the act out. I would tend to my premise setup and punchline of joke part was missing in a lot of my jokes. I would go, my bed was so comfortable it would try to seduce me, and then I would do that bed seducing me. So there's no joke there. There it just is an immediate frog bank. Girlfriend trying to seduce you in the morning before work, but it's my bed. So it goes straight into that act out. And so,
So how would what we learned with today? How could you?
well, you just
Is
tell a
there a way
joke
to?
first. You just do a joke first, I don't have a joke for that right away, but you would put a joke in a premise, setup, and punchline first. No, I don't know. I just say I'd love I always try to get to work on time. I make about as far as my bedroom door before my bed would try to seduce me back into it, And so there was a slow lead up to that game, but there wasn't really a premise setup punchline that introduced it. And so that's on me. I have to figure out how do I how do I do how do I do a joke in the beginning there that satisfies that if I want to be a stand up, and like I said, that's on me. Like a lot of traditional comics watched me on the Tonight Show and were like, where were your jokes? And they're offended by the fact that someone like me who is doing this more modern version of comedy, they took that as a shortcut.
How that make you feel?
I fucking made me mad. It made me it made me write my books. It made me try to understand why they were so mad. It made me try to get to the bottom of what their beef was with me, because I was getting laughs, and I was on the road. I was sleeping off in my car. I was doing all the things that every real comic does. Why are you mad at me? But that's just what happens when you're trying something new. And not to mention, there is a bit of a shortcut to that. There's a bit of a shortcut to that. And I was guilty of taking a shortcut that I didn't know I was taking. So I feel like now I'm able to understand what their beef was, and I get it. I don't argue it. But I also understand what my technique was, and I sort of stand by it as a modern technique. What I would say is, if I wanted to be called a stand-up comic, I needed to add those jokes in there. And then I could technically, instead of just being a comedian or whatever you would call it, like a comic, a stand-up comedian adds those jokes in there. A comic, it just says things funny. I think that's the way it goes. So again, that's what I wanted to talk about today, was just the idea that misdirection, that use of those heightening devices, that surprise, that satisfaction of a setup that you misdirected the crowd into thinking was going to go in a normal way. That's all part of being a comic. And if you want to be a good comic, you have to learn that methodology and you have to learn how you implement it. And everyone implements it a little bit differently, as we saw.
There's a bunch of kind of different magical kind of sleight of hands to get that set up to work, so the
Yeah.
punchline pays off.
It's a trick. I'm misdirecting you to think I mean one thing, and I'm fooling you, and I'm really mean another thing. And so you have to do that trick over and over and over again, or it's not stand-up comedy. But I like adding the act outs. I like adding the flavor at the end, and to me, that's the modern touch. And that's when I watch a comic has to be really funny to just do premise, setup, punchline, and then move on to another premise, setup, punchline. Like Dennis Miller was like that. He was a very premise, setup, punchline kind of guy. A lot of the talk show hosts are like that. You know, a monologue is premise, setup, punchline over and over
Jokes.
again.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of an antiquated format, but when you add the newer age touches to it, it brightens up, I think. So to me, a combination of the two is what I would strive to do now. All right, brother.
All right. Good session.
Yeah, good session. Appreciate you. See you.
Talk to you later.